No, I'm nervous and honored to be sitting next to Keki, and it's our absolute pleasure on behalf of UNext and ETHR that he consented to be there today with us despite his hectic board schedules. I had the pleasure of talking to him previously also, and we were just exchanging some notes before the start of the event. I think his calendar looks more busy now than when he was the chairman of HDFC in an official capacity. But thank you, sir, for making time for us, and I think it will be a great conversation. There's lots that Pooja and Natasha have set the tone for in the skilling in the age of AI. But before that, I think with a man like Keki on stage, I think there is lots to learn from his journey, and I think that itself is what we are here for the next 2 days. So without further ado, I think I'll dive straight into some questions, so that makes my job easier than the presenters who will come after me. So the first question, sir, is that your name is obviously synonymous with HDFC Group, and over the last 4 decades or 5 decades, it's now the largest financial conglomerate in the country. HDFC Bank, post the merger, is the largest bank and financial institution in the country. So just how your journey has been with the group, and how did you build this out, some of the defining moments. Some of these insights will be just valuable for all of us. It's just free-flowing, not to worry about the topic.
All right, so let me talk a little bit about how HDFC started, the kind of challenges we faced over time, and how we grew to be what we finally became. So HDFC started in 1977 when there was no formal system in India for anyone to avail of a housing loan. Why housing loan? Even a retail loan. Even if you wanted to buy take a loan to buy a car or a consumer durable or whatever, no bank would lend you money. And there were no specialized NBFCs in those days. So you had to go to a local money lender who would have charged you some exorbitant interest rate. So we were set up in an environment where retail financing did not exist in India. And therefore that made it that much more difficult in the early days to convince people that when you give a loan to a customer, the customer will truly come back and repay your loan. So when we started with a small capital. Capital was just 10 crores of rupees. And very quickly the capital got used up because we gave housing loans. And then once the 10 crores was over, we couldn't get money from anywhere else. Nobody else was willing to give us money. That was a time when we got our first breakthrough, actually 2 breakthroughs almost at the same time. One was a tiny loan from LIC, 10 crore loan from LIC, and the other was a 4 million, which today's context is really, really tiny, but a $4 million loan from IFC, the International Finance Corporation. As it turned out, that turned out to be the costliest loan we ever took. Because the day we took the loan, the exchange rate was and that number is etched in memory, $12.56064 for 100 rupees, which is 7 rupees 96 paisa to a dollar. Today, when you look at the rupee at 86 and 87, you should remember that in those days, the rupee was at under 8 rupees. The dollar was under 8 rupees. And in those days, there were no sophisticated methods of hedging your foreign exchange risk. So you had to actually just keep doing these 6 monthly forward covers, which obviously could not cover your liability. So I was just telling you the difficult times that we had when we started, and that $4 million loan gave confidence to Indian banks, Indian financial institutions thereafter to give us funding. So even though it was the costliest borrowing we ever did, because as I said, when we paid back the loan, the exchange rate was almost 17 or 18 rupees. It gave HDFC the stability and the confidence to go ahead. So that was one key point. And the second key point I would say would have been in 1992. Interest rates were very high. The Indian economy went through a very difficult period. I don't know how many of you would remember that. But we had, as a country, we had to go and pledge gold to come out of a IMF liability. Inflation was very high. Interest rates were sky high. If we borrowed money, we could have borrowed money at 15 or 16%, and that obviously would not have been possible to give housing loans if you borrow at that rate. So that was a time when we initiated this deposit program, where in those days, people if you went to a company and placed a deposit, it would take you 3 months or 4 months to get a deposit receipt. In today's age of digital and technology and various things, it sounds absurd, but really it was that in those days. So we initiated a system where we would give deposit receipt across the counter. And that gave, again, that was a huge boost. We were able to raise money at very low interest rates. So there have been various points of time when there have been challenges, 92, 2000, bit of a challenge. So over a period of time, we've had challenges. And how India has changed over that time. I remember in the 80s, when someone came to take a housing loan, borrowing was considered a stigma. It was not considered a good thing that you went to borrow money, even if it was to buy a house. So we had people coming to our office, some people, and they'd wear a cap and they'd wear glasses and they'd wear a mask so that they would not be recognized. That was the India of the early 1980s.
I think I'll change the order of the question because Keki gave this nice insight that how taking a loan was a stigma or a taboo. But sir, how do you think that has changed? How do you see now the young Indians, say in the last decade, think about savings, insurance, home ownership? How do you think it has changed?
See, 1992 was the starting change. It was the opening of the Indian economy, and slowly over a period of time, we started seeing privatization, private insurance companies, private banks, private mutual funds. Then came the whole era of social media in the last maybe 15 years or so. People started seeing what was being done in the Western world, and people in India started seeing that in the West, the lifestyles were very different, and that coupled with the fact that the Indian economy post-92 really has been on a bit of a rise, general rise. Yes, there have been ups, there have been downs, but generally speaking, the economy has been on a drive. So people in India today are much more willing to borrow money. In fact, we are today in a situation not very different from what it is in the West. West is way ahead. For us, it is starting. But today we see the young, the people in their 20s and early 20s and mid 20s coming and taking a loan to go on a holiday, which in those days, 30, 40 years ago, would have been unimaginable. So India has changed. India has become a lot more westernized in terms of people's habits, people's behavior, people's wishes, desires, what they want to do. And savings people, earlier the savings people would only put money in bank deposits or a little bit in equity markets. Now you see there are a whole host of new savings instruments which are available to people to invest in. There are insurance policies that are available which are in the nature of savings. There are, of course, the traditional bank deposits. There is equity. There are alternate investment funds. And there are a variety of other instruments which are there.
Fair. One more question to that. The big thing was the whole HDFC and the HDFC Bank merger. And it was a defining moment in the Indian financial services industry, the banking industry, I think one of the big consolidations. As a steward of the deal, what were the strategic considerations or how did it all go about? And I think I saw your interview that day with Shirin Bhan also on CNBC. You had some very interesting anecdotes. So Keki, if you can just share with this group, that would be really nice.
So, over a period of time, we always thought that a merger between HDFC Bank makes sense. Because at the end of the day, you need to have one lending institution. The way it was prior to the merger was that the bank did everything other than housing loans. And HDFC Limited did only housing loans and nothing else. And we said if we put everything in one entity, it will give it that much more capitalization, that much more strength, that much more distribution capability. And therefore, we always wanted to look at a merger, I would say from mid-2005, around 2005, 2010. But there never was an opportunity to do so because there are huge regulatory costs which are applicable when you become a bank. I don't want to get into the details here, but when you become a bank, there's a huge amount of money you need to set aside in terms of meeting what they call priority sector lending, CRR ratio, SLR requirements, so on and so forth. So 2020, COVID happened, and with COVID, interest rates came down substantially. And we thought, and also from a regulatory standpoint, there were a number of initiatives that the RBI took in order to reduce the burden of becoming a bank in terms of reduction in CRR, SLR requirement. So we thought it was an opportune moment, and therefore in 2022, we announced a merger. We worked on it for about 2 or 3 months without involving a single banker. So it was just 4 or 5 people from HDFC and 4 or 5 people from the bank who worked on it. And I don't know how many of you would know, but the day the merger was announced, I think 1st April 2022, there was not one single murmur in the newspaper about the merger prior to the announcement. And so when the announcement came at 9 o'clock in the morning and when markets opened, it took everyone by surprise. So to bring about the merger of this magnitude without it becoming public knowledge was a huge, huge task. We actually called up the bankers on the previous night. The board meeting was on 1st April. We called up the bankers on 31st March and said, tomorrow morning we're announcing the deal. There are no fees that will be payable to you, but if you want your name associated with it, we'd be happy to put your name. That's how it worked.
Wow. Yeah, I remember by then I had moved out of financial services, but like what an announcement it was. Like nobody knew, and next day morning you get up, it is all over the papers. HDFC is the vanguard of a values-driven organization. I also spent about close to 4-5 years on the insurance side. How do you and the leadership team under you shape the culture as the company grew from, like you said, like a 10 crore capital in those days to being the largest financial institution in the country? How did the culture keep pace with this growth when?
You know, very interesting question. We had a balance sheet size of about 8 lakh crores. And on a balance sheet size of 8 lakh crores, which is certainly not small by any stretch of imagination, we just had 4,136 employees working in HDFC. Just 4,136 employees. So if you look at any financial ratio, you look at profit per employee, you look at cost per employee, you look at anything, cost income ratio, you'd find that we had probably the best ratio, not in India, not in Asia, but one of the best in the world. And that we did because there were certain very clear guidelines that we kept for ourselves from a culture standpoint. So we always said that our business is not rocket science. What we need from people is loyalty, hard work, sincerity, and the highest degree of ethics. And therefore, we hired people with that kind of a mindset. We usually went to the universities and hired people fresh from college. They worked with us for about 18 months as a management trainee, where we put them through different functions. Then we identified what function that individual would be best suited for, and then we would absorb that individual and put him or her into that function. And then people made a career in the company. We shared wealth with people. We were not owned by any promoter. Our shares were all held in the market. Foreign institutional investors held almost 75-76% of equity. And we kept giving stock options. So every 3 years, 4 years, we would have a stock option plan. And we were the only company which gave stock options to every single employee in the company. Whether you were the chairman or you were the driver or a fellow who brought you tea or coffee, you would still get stock options. And therefore, everyone's future, everyone's success, or everyone's financial resources were dependent on how the company did. So that got us a lot of loyalty. We went about with a very open door policy, extremely open door policy. Any employee, irrespective of what his grade was, irrespective of who he was, he could walk into Deepak was our chairman, or my office, I was a vice chairman, walk into our office, talk to us, tell us that, this such and such thing can be done differently. And if we felt it was good, we would experiment with it, and we would inform the whole company that XYZ has made that suggestion and we've now implemented it. So it gave that person a sense of pride, a sense of importance. So many little strategies like this, which with many of you are HR people, so I'm sure you know that much, much better than me. I was always a finance man, but with a love for HR. So at some point of time, I was also leading the HR initiative in HDFC. So culture, we would tolerate mistakes. We are all human beings. Human beings make mistakes, and we would tolerate mistakes. If someone made a mistake, we would take him aside and talk to him privately and say, look, maybe this thing could have been done a little differently, or could have been done this way or that way. Never tell him publicly that, what you've done is wrong. And if someone did something good, then publicly we would announce it and tell the whole whole organization that XYZ has contributed this or contributed that or whatever. So all these things made people feel wanted. And I think the whole culture, if you ask me, Ambrish, is about making people feel wanted. We never had attrition. People never left HDFC. Yeah. Our attrition rate, if I take an average over 40 years, would have been under 4%, about 3.5% or so. And there was not a single year, not 1 year, where the attrition rate went to above 4%. Not a single year.
Wow.
So people did not leave it. It is not that we paid a lot of money. We didn't pay a lot of money. Yes, we gave stock options and the stock did well and therefore people made money. But apart from that, we were not the topmost paymaster. There were multinational companies who would have, given literally an arm and a foot to get some of our employees. But they stuck on to us because we made everyone feel wanted. And personally, when I joined HDFC and I worked for more than 40 years, the day I joined HDFC, I said that if ever I feel that on a Friday evening, I will say, thank God it's Friday. And on a Sunday evening, I'll say, oh God, I've got to go back to work tomorrow. That is the day I'll leave HDFC. And frankly, in 40 years, that never happened. Wow. So you create that sense of culture. You create that sense of culture, that sense of wanting. People don't leave. I really truly believe this. Many of you will disagree, but people do not leave because of salaries. Yes, if the salary difference or a compensation difference is huge, they may leave. People leave because they don't feel they are wanted. You have to make people feel wanted. You have to make them feel happy, because a happy employee will create a happy customer. If an employee is not happy, your customers will never be happy.
I couldn't agree more with that last statement.
Sorry, one last thing I would add is ethics. So we would tolerate mistakes, but we would never, ever, ever tolerate the slightest degree of bad behavior in terms of ethical behavior. And I think that creation of trust, creating that trust, that brand becomes hugely, hugely important. When we were in the lending business, our lending rates were always a little higher than everybody else's. But we could afford to lend at that higher rate because people trusted us. So you have to create that element of trust.
I think some part of that question, Keki, you've already answered, but I think it's relevant because a lot of course, senior HR leaders are here. There are young leaders also, business leaders also. I think ethics, integrity, obviously the big cultural pillars for HDFC. But in your view, on a personal and a professional level through this journey, what are some of the leadership insights based on these anchors that you just said would be good for all of us to take away as we build organizations, as many of us build careers, and many of us lead large teams in this room? What should we do?
So I would say 7 or 8 things. So, you can have a whole list of what you should do, but let's pick out the 7 or 8 most important things. Number 1, I think you must have very clear goals on what you want to do and what you want to achieve. We had very clear goals. We were in the lending business. Our goal was growth, but not market share. Surprisingly, not market share. We never bothered about market share. We believe that in the financial services business, I don't know how many of you are in the NBFC or in a bank, but in the financial business, it is the easiest thing in the world to gain market share. If you sacrifice asset quality, if you sacrifice your lending norms, if you sacrifice your margins, you'll get all the market share you'll want. And you'll be very successful in the short term. But in the long term, that you'll start facing challenges. So one is clear objectives, growth, asset quality. If you take the 45 odd years of HDFC, the total amount of money we did not recover from individual borrowers was only 0.04% of what we disbursed cumulatively. In 45 years, our loan losses were just 4 basis points. So that was the second. Third was cost control, which reflects in the cost-to-income ratio at around 7.6%, which is actually the lowest that you will see in a financial sector anywhere in the world. So clear objectives is number 1. Number 2, I would say, is creating the culture. We talked a little bit about creating culture. Get your employees right. Make your employees feel happy. Because if they feel happy, they will contribute much more. We never used to give overtime to employees. We never paid overtime. But every Saturday you would find that 60 to 70% of the people would come to office. And it's not because we asked them to come to office. It's just that they felt that there was a need, there was some work, they needed to come to office, and they came to office. So second is creating culture. Third, I would say is anything you do, think long term. Don't look at this quarter and next quarter and the quarter after that. Think of what you want to do 5 years later, 10 years later. And for that, it means you create the right risk management systems. So when something goes wrong, and something or the other will always go wrong because of macroeconomic events, you have the resilience. Your balance sheet has the resilience to be able to withstand those shocks. It's always the balance sheet that is more important than your P&L account. Then the fifth, I would say, would be changes. You need to keep innovating. The world is changing very fast. I'm on the board of TCS. TCS, you would know, is the largest software company in the country. And there is so much that we see in terms of changes to technology, to the way things are being done. Believe me, 5 years from now, what we are doing today will become completely obsolete. A lot of it will become obsolete. So today what we are doing, if we had done this 5 years ago, those things which we did 5 years ago have become obsolete now. So innovating, keep experimenting, keep doing, keep learning, and keep going ahead of your times. So that would be another objective. One or two more, which is trust. Build trust amongst your stakeholders, not just your employees but your customers. Building trust is very, very critical, very important. And keep the highest degree of ethics, and as an individual, try to remain humble, simple, approachable to everyone else. It will give you a lot of joy.
Great. I think all great insights to live by. I think should be part of our AOP discussions in all organizations, some of this. So here we have a lot of leaders, obviously, from the HR and the L&D field. And today, even as I build UNext, which is a tech company, and we have a large we are like partners to organizations in skilling and upskilling. And I also see now the role of an HR person evolving constantly in the organization. Now they have that seat at the table. A lot of HR leaders are at the board levels. Somebody like Leena Nair, being from an HR director at HUL, heads Chanel now. How do you feel the role of HR and learning teams in the world of AI evolving, keeping some of these 7-8 points that you said? How could they be also a big business driver in the future of the organization? HR largely as a team.
Look, HR is at the bottom of every organization. You can have the best of technology, you can have the best of products, but if you don't have the right people, your company will never be successful. So HR is the fundamental the base for any company to be successful. And again, HR is not just hiring the right people and retaining them, but more importantly, it is training them, making them aware of what is happening in the rest of the world. So they can think ahead of times, anticipate change, adopt to changes before your business is forced to, adopt those changes because somebody else has done it. So training, hiring, and motivating people. These two, my mind, would be the three most critical aspects of HR. And there's so much that is happening. If you look at being on TCS, you see some of these things. Artificial intelligence, how you use artificial intelligence to hire people, how you use artificial intelligence to motivate people, how you use artificial intelligence to train people. There's a lot that is happening. And I'm telling you, in 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years' time, all that you are doing today will undergo a change. You will be able to do things in a much more simplistic manner.
Right. I think a good point you raised about TCS and tech. And I think since you're here, I can't stop asking you about fintechs also. Now, banks, initially it was banks being technology leaders, technology in banks, then it became fintech, then we are talking about tech in finance. How is this a BFSI sector evolving, Keki, and from a branch banking-led model or a branch-based model to a digital-first approach? What is your take on the fintechs that are there? You're on the board of some of them. You're on the board of Flipkart, which has a close associate in PhonePe also. They themselves have an NBFC license. How do you see the workforce and the consumers also evolving between the old way of banking which is of course trust-based, risk management-based, and to the fintechs or the tech-enabled banking that's there?
See, Ambrish, if you ask me, the jury is still out. In the sense that whether a branch model is necessary and you can, or not, and whether you can shift entirely from a branch banking model to a digital-led model. I think the jury is still out. Different banks have adopted a different structure. HDFC Bank, for example, continues setting up more and more branches every year. ICICI, on the other hand, has followed a completely different strategy. So the jury is still out. But having said that, yes, the younger generation today is very, very savvy of what's going on. But there are certain things where, for example, housing. You take housing as an example. A lot of people come and tell me, should we buy a house or should we stay in a rented house? Just shifting away from your question. And my answer to them is always the same, which is always buy a house. Because a house will give you that financial comfort, of that financial stability at some point of time in future when you retire or you leave your company, that you can theoretically, if you wish, sell off your house, move to a smaller town and raise enough money by doing that to sustain your future. So owning a house, very important. Even 15 and 20 years ago, people used to tell me that the younger generation of that time wanted to only rent houses and not buy houses. I think that is completely untrue. And it has proved to be untrue. People buy houses when they're in the mid-30s. I think that the role for a fintech company, enormous, but there are so many multiple fintech companies. Every one of them is not going to true. Be successful. But many of them will be. If you have niche ideas, there will be lots of banks will be willing to, look at those ideas, buy those ideas. So depends on what the idea is, depends on what the fintech is.
I think I'm a firm believer in buying the house, obviously. And that reminds me of an anecdote. At B School, HDFC had come to recruit way back in 2001, 2002. And I don't recall the name of the business head who was there, but he ended his presentation with the biggest advantage of you joining HDFC that you will be flat out because we are giving loans at 2% or something. So everybody will get a house. Anyway, sir, coming back to another point, of course, because we are discussing about people, how do you see like you rightly mentioned, people stay because they feel their work is wanted, they are respected. You yourself said that I never think of thank God it's Friday and that part. How do you see the shortage of talent coming in the financial services sector? And what are both at the mid-level, entry-level or leadership level, how do you see, even from your board perspectives, as well as evolution, say, in the last decade and post-COVID, this work from home, learn from home, how do you see that evolving?
See, I don't think there is shortage of people. I think there is a shortage of people, the skill sets that are required for a job. And I think the most important thing is creating those skill sets. If you see overall, there is a fair amount of unemployment in India, a certain amount of unemployment in India. But if you look at the financial services sector and you look at the frontline staff in financial services, most companies, whether it's banks, whether it's NBFCs, whether it's mutual funds, whether it's insurance companies, all of them are seeing attrition levels of 30% plus. Now, it's ironical that on one side, people need jobs, and on the other side, the frontline staff leave so early. So I think there is a lot that one can do in terms of cost saving, in terms of improving productivity by getting these guys, training these guys, retaining these guys. Now, the problem is that just to retain people, many companies tend to promote ahead of time. So the person is not ready for a higher post, but because you feel he or she is going to leave, you give that person a promotion. And then that person's career is spoiled because he's put in a role where he's not suited, he's not been adequately trained. So there is a lot that one can that one can think through, where you don't necessarily have to pay higher salaries, and you don't necessarily have to just keep promoting people for the sake of promoting people, but just make them feel good. Just communicate to them. Have that open line of communication where you as HR communicate to each and every one of your employees, know each and every one of your employees, communicate to each and every one of your employees what their future career is, why they would be ready for a promotion maybe 1 year, 2 years later, what other skill sets that they require to take over or to acquire before they get those promotions. So every level there is some difference. I don't think you see attrition at higher levels. At higher levels, people are a lot more set. But there again, you have a challenge because people tend to be very set in their ideas. And in today's world, everything is changing so very fast that you have to be nimble, you have to be flexible. You can't, just because you are occupying a certain high position, an individual's occupying a high position, he has to be willing to adopt, change, experiment, because the world is changing like that.
All good points, I think. And my team here, please make note. No promotions unless you're ready. On a lighter note. One more thing, Keki, I think you mentioned in your HDFC journey about the 1991 opening of the economy. You've been through the 2008 global financial crisis and multiple organizational transitions. HDFC has acquired companies. Credila now going to go for an IPO. And you have groomed, I think, a generation of leaders in the financial services space. I can take many names, but what in your view now, as you guide and advise boards and many young people would come to you and organizations, what creates enduring leaders, and especially in the uncertain times that we are living in? What are some of those few qualities that you feel you have seen and
in a leader,
being an enduring leader through crisis, good times and bad?
So a leader has to be adaptable. A leader cannot be set in his or her ideas. You have to move with times. You have to be willing to adopt yourself, keep changing your view. There will be failures along the way, and a leader has to learn to accept those failures. Life is not, a straight line. There'll be ups and downs in life, and you have to be able to absorb the bad times to be able to plan for the good times. And a leader will always prepare for the worst. So you have to have create enough resilience in your company, whether it's in your balance sheet, whether it's in your employees, whether it's in your whatever infrastructure, whatever it be. You have to create enough resilience to be able to, accept or to go through a bad patch which may come. Take COVID, for example. COVID came out of the blue. Today, if you're an export-driven industry, this whole question of tariffs and what will tariffs end up in, nobody knows where it's going to be. So your business has to be adaptable. You should be able to adapt quickly to any changes that happen. And don't think short-term, think long-term. No leader should be thinking of this quarter or next quarter. Your vision should be what you should be, or what your company should be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. That should be your vision, not how your P&L is going to look in the September quarter or the December quarter.
Yeah, true enough. I think life is it's a long-term bet, but a series of short-term bets also, and you have to manage the two. I think one more point is there. You briefly touched upon AI also at your vantage point seeing at TCS, and we hear all this noise about IT services company, the impact on their models. But Keki, what's your view on AI in the next 5 years, whether impacting organizations, people, some broad strokes, what you think and what we should do? Of course, upskilling and reskilling is what everybody is doing, and we are also here for the next 2 days. But what are some broad strokes that come to your mind when you see the world changing and interacting with different sets of people?
Sure. So let me tell you, I think what AI will be capable of doing 5 years from now, today you and I have no idea. It is an evolving world, and it is changing very, 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 very fast. What AI could do 6 months ago, today what AI can do is a lot more. And what it will be able to do 6 months or 12 months from now, it's something which is difficult for us to envisage today. But AI is going to come in a very big way. What kind of regulations will come in the country, we don't know. Obviously, there will have to be some very, very strong regulations to, AI can be misused in a lot of ways. So there will have to be regulation to make sure that is not done. So it's an evolving time, difficult to say. A lot of people say that AI will take away jobs. I was with somebody a couple of days ago, and he said that not just a very senior person from an IT industry, not TCS, and he was saying that AI will take away 20% of the jobs. I don't believe so personally. In my view, what will be required is a change in skill sets. People will still be required, but the skills that they will require, what they will need to do, may be different from what they are doing today. So the HR people sitting in this room have a very big role to play, because you have to understand what the training needs will be to make people adapt to AI as and when it becomes more and more in force.
I think I quite agree. I think I read a beautiful line about somebody who was asked this question, and they said that with AI, maybe jobs might not be lost, but some profession might be lost, and you will upskill and reskill. And of course, human beings are one of the most resilient species, and we'll come out of it. I think I have only a couple of minutes left, but before we let Keki go, I think we've discussed all the business things, but to have a leader of his stature among us, we should ask him some personal and fun question also. So, as I said, I don't know if you all are aware, some of those who may be knowing him or have heard his interviews. He's very fond of cricket, which many of us in this room obviously are. But Keki was also a boxer. He was very fond of boxing. And although I have heard him speak in one of the HDFC board meetings way long back, his Hindi is not so great, but he's fond of old Hindi songs also. So, sir, how did you take time out? Like today, yes, we have these smartphones and all, but how did your passion keep up with the pace of your work? How has it changed? How has it shaped you? Some personal insights.
Yeah, so boxing was just something that happened in college days. It's not that I was a professional boxer at any point of time, but I used to indulge a little bit in boxing. And then somewhere I lost my tooth. My front tooth is a false tooth, and thereafter I stopped boxing. So that's the background. But I used to be very fond of cricket. I used to play cricket. I used to be a fast bowler. And when you're a fast bowler, those days I didn't look what I look today. I used to be probably 40 kilos lighter. But when you are a fast bowler, you tend to put a lot of weight on and right-hand fast bowler, you put a lot of weight on your left knee and your right shoulder. So my left knee was damaged at that time, and I continued to be very passionate about cricket. So there were lots of favorites of mine over the years. Sachin Tendulkar was the latest, Farooq Engineer, Badekar, Gavaskar, variety of people. So cricket was a passion. Boxing was never a passion, frankly. And Hindi songs, yes, I love Hindi songs, but I used Hindi songs to understand Hindi. Okay. Because I can't speak Hindi. My Hindi is very, very bad. So if you tell me to sing a song, I can't sing a song. My pronunciation will be a disaster. I've done interviews in Hindi in variety of television channels, and I start the first sentence I try to speak in Hindi and then move to English. But that first sentence which I speak in Hindi turns out to be usually a disaster.
No, great. And Keki, last question is, you've spoken a lot of things, but what would your advice be to somebody who is building a career, who say 25, 30-year-old, or what would be your advice to be a CEO or the CXOs in this room as they chart their careers, they chart the growth path of their organizations? Some mantra to live by for all of us.
All right, so let me just talk half a minute on the economy. I think the Indian economy is doing extremely well. There are bumps along the way. We are at the moment in a slightly marginally weaker economy, because we are seeing the loan growth in the banking system at sub 10% for probably the first time this quarter. But I think we'll pass through that phase. And for any youngster, India is the place to be in today. In my view, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that the future for India is phenomenal. Today, India is the third or fourth largest economy, depending on whether you look at Japan in a certain manner or not. But clearly, in my view, fourth or fifth economy, fourth or fifth largest economy in the world. But clearly, in my view, the Indian economy will grow at upwards of 6.5%, 7%, and has a potential to grow beyond 7% for multiple years. And you compare that with the rest of the world, the emerging markets are growing at around 3%, 3.5%, and the developed markets are growing at less than 2%. So in that context, India's growth of 6.5 or 7 or wherever we land up is huge. So massive job opportunities, massive growth potential. I would really urge people that when you finish your studies, whichever part of the world you go to, come back to India, because the opportunities that you will get in your country, in this country, will be far more than what you will get in the Western world.
I think great. I think nobody could have said it better. I think India is the land of opportunities, and the way things are, you mentioned about the economy. I think we also feel it in some parts of our businesses, but going forward. So one last piece of advice for us. What do you think in our personal life, one piece of advice, and professional life, one piece of advice?
I would just say two things. One is keep the highest level of integrity, because integrity brings trust. And the most important thing when you're dealing with stakeholders is trust. So number one, integrity. And number two, always remain approachable. Always remain humble. Always remain simple. The world will always look up to you if you're humble, if you're simple. You may be having a position of huge authority today. And if you start believing that you're really that big and you start isolating yourself from the rest of the people, the day your job goes, the day you leave your job, nobody's going to look to you. But if you remain humble, you remain simple, you remain approachable, the whole world will keep looking up to you forever.
Wow, I think the perfect note to end. Thank you, Keki. And I think a wonderful start to the beautiful session and for the next 2 days that we are here for. May I request all of you to please give a standing ovation to Keki for making time for us for today.
Indeed. What an absolute amazing learning experience for all of us. Mr. Mistry doesn't come to events often, so I think all of us here are very lucky to not only get a chance to listen in, learn through the success mantras, but also, sir, thank you so very much for your presence. I'd like to request you to please continue with your presence on stage for just a moment as I welcome Mr. Atar Shah to please join us on stage and present you and Mr. Sinha with the plaque of honor, as we'd like to thank you for joining us here today and for starting Convergence 2025 on such an amazing note. Thank you, audience members. Please do take a seat as we take a moment and present our amazing leader with a plaque of honor and thank him for being a part of UNext and Manipal Academy of BFSI presents Convergence 2025 in association with ETHR World. Mr. Sinha, you're a leader who we'd like to honor. So may we present Mr. Sinha with a plaque of honor as well, because for us, sir, you truly are a visionary leader as well. A round of applause as I request all three of you to please share this moment with us. Thank you, Mr. Shah. You've been very kind. I'd now like to request Mr. Sinha to please present a memento. This is our love, warmth, and a little bit of the Rajasthani culture for you, sir, as we'd like to present you with this memento that has been very artistically curated specially for you. A round of applause, please.